How to design a beautiful object. Straight off the bat, I will say that I know beauty is subjective, and we could talk about that for hours and hours. But I'm hoping that we can agree on something, and that is that delusions of beauty and delusions of coolness are very serious conditions that affect millions of people worldwide. And with the modicum of authority I've earned through designing wristwatches, this is my shot at a cure. So how to design a beautiful object? My first piece of advice to you all, should you be interested in designing a beautiful object, is don't bother. Don't bother because it is really hard and it's going to take everything that you have in order to succeed, because it is an all or nothing job. You can't just dip in and dip out. You will fail. In order to do a proper job, it requires great effort. You are going to age prematurely. Lose hair, lose sleep, get a divorce and die, okay? Obviously the last two didn't happen to me, but perhaps it got close. I believe that if there is something out there that you are considering designing and you've got an idea, don't bother because it already exists. Just go out and buy it. You won't have to sell your beloved E32 735i BMW, nor your favourite Turner RFX six-pack mountain bike, or your wife's mountain bike without her permission, nor will you have to sell your favourite ukulele. I had to sell all of those things. So you're stubborn, you're still here, you want to pursue this dream, or you've been told to do it by a boss perhaps. So maybe stubbornness is a virtue. No, stubbornness is not a virtue. You don't want to be stubborn. Stubbornness is a stupid mule. Stubbornness is obstinate refusal. If you're stubborn and you want to design a beautiful object, you will fail. Tenacity is a very strong will. Tenacity is dedicated determination. It is rolling with the blows. It is bending like a reed in the wind. Tenacity is saying, let's work on this together to make it better. And so tenacity is our first milestone on how to design a beautiful object. And it is included in this talk because it affects the outcome of your design if you are tenacious. This is what tenacious looks like. This is the tenacious path. It is a winding, convoluted path. It has ups, it has downs, and sometimes it goes backwards before it goes forwards. If it was stubbornness, the journey from A to B would be a straight line. A door opened for me. I met a guy that could design and make carbon fibre watches. I didn't believe him, it was a challenge. It wasn't a direction Schofield was going to go in. It wasn't planned, but we went through that door. That's being tenacious, it's being flexible. You have an adventure with being tenacious, and without it, you will fail. And on this long road that you have to go on, you need fuel, a very strong and powerful fuel, full of energy, to get you up those hills and round those corners. And that fuel is enthusiasm. It's included here as the second milestone on how to design a beautiful object, because again, it will influence your design. People like enthusiastic people. Doors open for enthusiastic people. And those opportunities will come. I've been enthusiastic for woodwork from a very early age. I made this car when I was 11. And so it was with enthusiasm that I went about making the Schofield boxes for our watches. But I was stubborn. Stubborn and enthusiastic, that's a terrible combination. The first 5 suppliers, makers of wooden boxes, I completely ignored and rejected because they wanted to compromise my design. I learnt that if I was going to get this job done, I had to be tenacious. And so a further 27, you need enthusiasm for that, suppliers were spoken to, and I learnt so much about the manufacture to make a duplicate product to get our boxes done. I had to be flexible. The thing is with enthusiasm, you can't just be enthusiastic about woodwork. You can't just be enthusiastic about watches or just about design or whatever it is you're into. You need to be enthusiastic about tons of stuff in order to do a proper job. You've got to be enthusiastic about computers, Science, manufacture, money, gathering data, because all of these things will have an effect on the outcome of your design. And the thing is, if you cannot get enthusiastic about something, you've got to find someone who will. You've got to gather a team. And of course that's included here, because your team is going to influence the design of your product. Really, you want an enthusiastic, tenacious team. And you get a team by being honest. You've got to hold your hand up and recognize your own shortcomings. You've got to say, I'm a designer, but I'm a terrible engineer. I'll get an engineer in. Is it not the case of so much that we see, maybe here and around us, where just because somebody's good at adding drop shadow in Photoshop doesn't necessarily make them a good designer? You've got to be honest about what you can and cannot do. You've got to be tenacious, get enthusiastic, and gather a team. Okay, so that's your mental health sorted out. And perhaps now is a good time to get stuck in to asking some questions. What kind of team was involved with this beautiful guitar? 1930s National Resonator guitar. This wasn't one man's job. One man led it, John Dopiera, but he had a fantastic team. A team of metal workers, a team of metal fabricators, a team of metal polishers and finishers, fret cutters, inlay cutters, gear turners, string parts and resonator parts to bring us that beautiful object. If he did not have a good team and he did not have enthusiasm, we would have never have seen this wonderful object. So the design, I'm not naive to think that you don't start the project with something down on paper. Of course you have an idea. The point of this talk is don't do anything about it until you follow all of these instructions, because you will fail, because there are so many amendments to be made along the way. This is not the time to finalize your design just because you're enthusiastic. Absolutely not. You will fail. And this is because a designer's mind is wild. It's crazy. It needs focus. It needs education. Like any of you going into the Endeavour Space Shuttle flight deck and trying to fly it. It would be catastrophic. You need to understand it. You need education. You need to gather some data, some intel, right? And we do that in the world of design through constraints. Constraints is a huge subject, and you can fill it with whatever you like. Here I have market research, the brief, personal tastes, fads, fashions, style, cost, but you may have cultural, political, sexual constraints. And these will all have a huge influence on your design. Now, market research, that is a huge subject, and I'm not going to go into it now. There are many people much cleverer than myself, written books, forums, talks on market research. But what I will impress upon you is the gravity of getting it wrong. This is Clairol, touch of yogurt shampoo. Clairol neglected to ask one question. Simple. That question was, do you want to put yogurt on your hair? No, I don't want to put yogurt on my hair. That'd be awful, okay? I might want to put milk proteins. After all, that's the bit in this that was meant to be good, but not yogurt. They didn't ask the question, and it cost them billions. Another example, a classic example, is the Edsel Ford. Now, this car in the 1950s was launched to very high expectation. It was the atomic era, and people expected this car to run on banana skins. It didn't. It ran on fuel like all of its contemporaries. But luminaries in marketing have suggested that this car failed because the front grille resembled a certain part of the female anatomy. It's true. And in the 1950s, a very prudish time, people did not want to be driving around with ladies' parts on the front of their car. They forgot to ask the question, not just the question is this car got a happy or a sad face, that classic question, but in more depth. And it cost Ford billions. It failed. Have you got billions to lose in your quest for designing a beautiful object? You cannot neglect, nor should you ever neglect, market research. Cost. If you've got all the money in the world, you have no excuse but to make a beautiful object because you've got all the resources to hand. You can afford the finest materials, the finest staff, the finest fabricators, the finest engineers, or whatever it is that you're into. You have no excuse. Cost needs to be worked out before you put pen to paper or whiz round Adobe Illustrator with your mouse because it has enormous implications on your design. If you gave me £10, I could not design you a beautiful guitar, a beautiful car, or a beautiful watch. And I doubt any of you could either. But I could design the most beautiful drawing pin in the world. Cost is critical. I know it's obvious, but it's important to get this down before you finalise your design. And the brief imposed upon you by others, if you work in the industry of design, or perhaps you impose it upon yourself with your own brief. Having a brief is a nightmare for so many designers. Having a board, terrible. Arne Jacobsen designed this wonderful flatware. I know it's cool, I own this. This was used in 2001 Space Odyssey, the film. It's very cool. But in the 1950s, it was pretty maverick stuff. My hat goes off to the company that made it. It was their hair that was lost. It was those guys, that board that aged prematurely. Arne Jacobsen was a great negotiator, and that's what so many designers have to be, to negotiate themselves away or around the brief. And of course, Dieter Rams, somebody we all know, and we laud his products as they are fantastic and relevant and most certainly beautiful. But again, it was Braun that brought us those products. He went beyond negotiation. He had a partnership. That's the designer's dream, to be in a partnership with a company that says, you're awesome, I'll run with that. Doesn't matter how much it costs, make it, we'll do it. I would love that. And personal taste. It's very hard to get enthusiastic about something you're just not into. And so when you are given a job or you're doing it for yourself, personal taste has a huge effect on the design outcome. I've been using the same colours for 20 years. And it's not because I'm narrow-minded, it's because I like these colours and I haven't changed my mind. And they happen to suit my taste and my design style. I also use the Fibonacci sequence of numbers to help me lay out typography. It gives me focus. It gives my work a flavour. It constrains those wild thoughts. As an example, when I first started Schofield, I was into westerns. That was a fad, a fashion. And so all of my typography was huge slab serif fonts like wanted posters. Terrible. There's nothing classic or beautiful about that. It was a fad. I also use the golden rectangle. It helps me lay out components in design. And I wasn't the first. The Parthenon was designed with golden rectangle and the golden ratio. So was a Stradivarius violin. I come up with and use other people's and devise these little tools like the circle of cool to understand where the stuff I'm going to make exists in the world. Do I want a dull product? Perhaps. I don't personally, but you might. It might be a deliberate choice of yours. I want cool stuff. I want it right at the edge, the cutting edge of cool. Not too close to crap, couldn't confuse it with it, but it's got to be cool. That's a deliberate choice. And the golden mean, this represents the middle ground between two extremes. I choose courage, courageous design. But some designers, I've seen some out there, that choose reckless, and there are plenty that are cowardly. That may have been designed. And if you can justify that, that's great. But you've got to plan for it. The nexus of niche, another little device of mine. This explains conservative products here, like the ones you may see in the high street. Many, many people will shop and buy for those conservative products. But their engagement is very low. They don't ask questions like, who made it? How was it made? Where was it made? How ethical is it? How environmentally conscious is it? And as we move towards the line, you have more niche products, more unusual products. Fewer people are into those, but the engagement will be very, very high. It's the world of geeks, watch guys. They want to know their stuff. They want to have the answers, and you've got to be able to give it to them. The other side of the line is I don't get involved with that. That's weird stuff for weird's sake, and teenagers like that just because it's weird. They don't ask questions of it, they just want it because it's weird. So for Schofield, we want to be here, safely behind the line. Never weird. This is deliberate planning of how we pursue and how we design our products. And that all seems very introspective, very egotistic. Not so. I believe good design is altruistic. It looks outwards more than it looks inwards. And this is represented by the 5th milestone on our journey to design a beautiful object, and that is your responsibilities. My responsibilities as a designer are obviously to stay in business, so I'm there for you. That's a responsibility. I have responsibilities to the environment, and that will influence the design of my products because of the materials that I choose. I have a responsibility to the users. We claim clarity with our design, so therefore our watches should be clear. They should be legible. You should be able to tell the time. You should be able to use the crown and make those adjustments sensibly. That's my responsibilities as a designer. But more than that, I have responsibilities to everybody involved with the product at any point of its timeline, for its entire product life cycle. That includes the guy repairing the watch, should you be foolish enough to drop it on the floor. He's got to be able to get in there and use it. It's got to be user-friendly for him as well. And then I have responsibilities for disposal, ultimately, and the environment again. These are your responsibilities, number 5. And this is where this talk differs from a talk about art and craft. This is about stuff that is duplicated. More than one is made. Something like this beautiful perfume bottle by Mary Angus, it's a one-off. An artist that makes one-offs has less responsibilities, perhaps. Perhaps they have less constraints. And unfortunately, for most of us, we do not live in a world where we can furnish our lives with one-off products. We have to get involved with stuff that is mass-produced, that is a duplicate of one another. And that's why this talk is important, because it is a battle plan against mediocrity that we see so much of in mass-produced design. And all of this is achieved very simply by asking questions. Number 6, the 6th milestone in our talk, is 1 billion whys. And here's the really profound thing about asking questions. It may come across as quite simplistic to some of you. I think it's really profound. It's this. If you ask lots and lots of questions, you get lots of answers. Don't you want answers? Don't you want to be knowledgeable? Don't you want to be the authority on your subject? 1 billion whys will make you wise. Okay? Ask questions. Let's ask some questions of our resonator guitar. We're going to make it out of metal. How's that going to affect the acoustics? How is that going to change depending on the temperature? Is that metal going to withstand the wear of the day? Gentlemen wearing waistcoats, waistcoat buttons, the buttons scratch the back of the guitars, the plectrum hitting the front. How's the wear going to affect it? Is it going to look tatty really quickly, and will the customer be disappointed? What can we finish it in? What will that finish, how will that finish affect the sound of the instrument again? How will it affect the weight? Is the instrument going to be played standing up or sitting down? Does it need to be grippy on the knee so it doesn't slide off? Do we need to add strap fastenings? All of these questions are affecting the design. How big are the hands of the people playing the guitar? How wide should the fretboard be? The balance, the torque from the tuning pegs. Has a huge effect answering questions. What questions do we ask of Schofield Watches? This is the new silver top. Apart from the obvious ones that you may have heard before, it's design cues, engineering questions. What about the emotional questions that we might ask? Like of the guitar before. It was a new instrument of its era. Would you feel proud to play it? Or with a big shiny guitar, are you going to feel really stupid? These are questions you've got to ask. And with our watches and our products, we want more than that. We want more than just privilege. privilege is just having the money to be able to afford them. We want you to feel honoured because there aren't many of them. We want you to feel special, part of our club, part of a unique gang of people that appreciate what we do. That's what we want you to feel. And of course, we want you to feel happy, content, pleased at every interaction of our business. This, and knowing these things, influences the design. It helps you make choices. You see, we all get so excited, don't we, about form and function as designers. So many designers I meet, especially students, think it begins with form and function. It does not. It ends with form and function. Form and function is the result of asking your questions, of understanding your constraints. I get asked, how do we ask the questions? What questions do we ask? And that is a tricky thing. Not everybody is good at asking questions. You've only got to see my mother type something into Google. It's incredibly frustrating. Asking questions is a skill. And in the world of design, it's actually quite easy. Empathy. Empathy is what allows you to ask the right questions. It's an emotional capacity. It's being able to put yourself in somebody else's shoes to see what it is like to interact, to get involved with that. And you can be more abstract. What's it like to be in the environment's shoes with your product? You should ask the repairman what it's like to be involved with your product. Every point along the way. We made a cigar tube. We still do. This cigar tube, aluminium, heavy stainless steel ends. I gave it to a gentleman. He unscrewed one of the ends and nearly dropped it on the floor. He picked it up, grabbed it just before it landed on the floor. He felt stupid. He thought it was his fault. He apologized. He felt clumsy. I had failed as a designer of that piece, of the stainless steel end cap to a cigar tube. I had failed because the weight had exceeded his expectations. It was unusually heavy. He fumbled with it and dropped it. I had failed, and through empathy, I could understand that I don't want my customers to feel stupid. I don't want my customers to feel clumsy. As I said before, I want them to feel fantastic. So we re-engineered the part. Very simple. We drilled it out from the inside. Its weight now matches your expectations of its size. It doesn't surprise you. It doesn't catch you unawares. And this is how empathy will affect the design ultimately. And with all of this data you've gathered and all of these questions that you have asked, you now have the reason. You are able to explain what it is you have done and why you have done it. You should, and I believe this is where good design is at, be able to justify every reason, every tenth of a millimetre of the decisions you have made to include or exclude something. Reasoning to the nth degree. And number 7, the final milestone on how to design a beautiful object is test. If you do not test the stuff that you make, the ideas that you have, you are a fool. You would not believe how many people I have met who have said, I don't want to show anybody this stuff because I'm scared somebody will copy it. You'll never get it done. And what's the point of even embarking on any journey if you're not going to see it through to the end? You need to test and test along the way with everybody, with every part. And now you have everything required to finalize your design. You won't get it wrong. You will succeed. You have the whole story. You've got the energy to get you there. You've got the mental health to get you there. You understand your constraints. You understand your costs. And your personal taste has narrowed it down. Now you are ready to finalize and finish your design. Be tenacious. Get enthusiastic. Gather a team. Constrain your ideas with laser beam focus. Be responsible, or at least understand your responsibilities. Ask many, many questions and test everything, and then you will succeed. Thank you. I have a lot of design favourites. I have to be very careful that I don't get caught up in fads and fashions, which we all do. I do think that's a danger, and being able to see past that in order to have longevity, to be able to have pleasure for an extended period of time in design. That certainly takes skill to look beyond that. And often for many people, I believe that constraint to a point of dullness or conservatism often equals classicism and design that has longevity. I don't believe that's true. And I think when you find the pieces that are really interesting and daring and courageous, but have been so well designed that they do last forever. And interestingly, on that point, often cost has something to do with that, because if something is really expensive, then naturally we're forced to love it for a very long time. And it artificially has longevity as a design classic because it was very expensive. So your question's hard to answer because of those things, because I think as a human being, we're fooled into what is actually a beautiful object a lot of the time. I think something like, I often talk about the custard cream as a beautiful object, you know, as a classic piece of design, because it's lasted so long and it's such a successful piece of design. Something like the resonator guitar, it's an absolute classic, you know, and that's why I deliberately choose not to put things like an Eames chair or the artichoke lamp or even a Porsche 911, you know, these classic icons of design that so many people love, because I think there is so much more, but it does require, I won't say special eyes, but special eyes to be able to spot that stuff and appreciate it. And that's why I like talking more about these more niche products and stuff that so many of us take for granted, often because they're duplicated. We reserve so much of that energy and that reverence for one-off pieces. And I think that's a shame, and that's why I talk about this being a battle plan against mediocrity, to be able to appreciate mass-produced items like mid-century modern gave us. It gave us a new lease of appreciation, but it again was a very narrow group set, and so I would like to see a larger appreciation for beautiful design without being thrown off course by cost. Okay, thank you.